The father's behavior reads like advanced addiction fused with moral collapse. Manipulation, fraud, emotional exploitation, even the use of his daughter's identity as financial collateral. But the more disturbing case may be the men around the table. One orchestrates public humiliation to bait a rival, another builds control through deceit, rigged patterns, and strategic dependency. And the daughter? She presents like a trauma-adapted survivor, hyper-observant, emotionally restrained, trained by years of chaos to read danger faster than anyone else in the room. This story is terrifying because nobody here is simply evil or innocent. They are all products of violence, until she becomes the one person capable of breaking the script.
The night her father decided to use her as his final poker chip, the room went so quiet you could almost hear the deck plotting against him. She'd come straight from the gym, rocking a gray t-shirt and messy hair. A private service lift had dumped her right into this den of wolves. A room filled with men so rich they didn't need to shout and so dangerous they never had to. The air was a nasty mix of old money, expensive whiskey, and pure fear. Green lamps lit up a single table where 2 armed guards stood like statues. And running the whole show was Sergio Lombardi, the guy whose name was basically the pulse of Las Vegas. Sergio's power was all over the city. He had casinos, unions, VIP clubs, and a bunch of city council members on speed dial. Rumor was he owned one half of Vegas, and the other half just paid him to exist. He was younger than the stories let on, maybe mid-30s, with slicked back dark hair and a perfect black suit. The guy was so still he made everyone else in the room look like they were vibrating. His face gave away nothing, but his ice-cold eyes missed 0 details. Across from him sat her dad, Raymond Reyes, sweating through a cheap shirt, his shaking hands telling the whole story of his epic fail. Her dad had a charm that felt like a warm hug right before you realized you were on fire. It was just desperation with a smooth delivery. He taught her to read cards before he taught her to look both ways. By 12, she could spot a rigged shuffle from across the room. At 14, she could read a bluff on a dude trying not to cry. By 16, she knew the bitter, metallic smell of addiction. Now at 26, she usually ignored his calls, but 40 minutes ago, an old pit boss rang her. "Get him," he said. "If you don't show, he's not walking out of there." So she bolted from the gym, knuckles still wrapped, and took an elevator straight down to hell. She walked in expecting to find her dad drunk, maybe beaten down or even bleeding. What she didn't expect to hear was his voice, cracked with panic, saying, "I've got one last thing to bet." The dealer didn't even flinch. Her father wiped a hand over his face and pointed straight at her. "My daughter." Those 2 words hit her like a physical blow. Every single head in the room snapped in her direction. She was stuck, just a few feet from the door, as a cold, hard resolve formed inside her. Her dad's eyes were locked on Sergio, not her, and that was the cut that went deepest. He didn't even have the guts to look at her while he sold her off. "Maya," he announced. "She works surveillance, she's sharp as a tack, knows the game inside and out. If you win," he offered, "she's yours until my debt is paid." For a woman who had mastered the ultimate poker face for one insane second, she totally forgot how to breathe. Then a laugh just burst out of her, a raw, ugly sound full of pure disbelief. "You drunk, brainless idiot," she snarled, marching to the table. "I'm not a bargaining chip. I'm not a watch. I'm not something you can just toss into the pot." Her father recoiled, but only because she was yelling. He didn't know what shame was. All he had left was fear. Fear was the only thing his addiction still listened to. Sergio Lombardi just leaned back, his face a total blank. He held her father's stare for a long beat before his eyes finally flicked over to her. It was like standing in front of a locked door, only to find out the person inside already knew all of your secrets. "People don't belong in the pot," Sergio finally said, his voice low and deep, making the room feel smaller. Her dad swallowed hard. "Then call it whatever you want," he mumbled. "Her mother's house is in my name. So is the credit line. I used hers for the marker. Everything she has is on this table." Her heart just stopped. She stared at him, her vision tunneling until he was the only thing she could see. What marker? He refused to meet her gaze, and that was all the confirmation she needed. She turned back to Sergio. "So he forged my signature." "I'm aware," Sergio replied, and those 3 words were colder than any accusation. A chill ran straight down her spine. He knew. It made sense. A guy like him would never play a hand without seeing all the cards first. With a tiny flick of 2 fingers, one of his guys handed him a thin leather folder. Sergio opened it slowly, his eyes scanning the first page. "Your father used your name to open a private medical line of credit 18 months ago," he explained, looking right at her. "Not the guy who did it. Then he took a second loan against the house in North Las Vegas that was your mother's. He cashed them both out. Tonight, that debt is on the table." She stared at her father. 18 months! The hospital bill she fought for 3 weeks! She had lived on instant noodles for 2 months to bounce back from that hit. She'd sold her mom's bracelet just to keep the lights on, and he had signed her name to a loan. Something inside her broke. A clean, final snap. Her father licked his lips, trying on a weak smile that had fooled so many others. "Mija, just listen." "No." The word was flat, with 0 emotion behind it. She looked back at Sergio. "If you already knew all this, then why am I here?" His eyes locked with hers. "Because your father made a public offer," he said. "And there are 3 guys in this room who would buy that debt before sunrise if I turn it down." That made her scan the faces around the table. She spotted Enzo Carbone at the far end, the guy who handled gambling finances for Lombardi's casinos. She remembered him from a security feed once, walking through a vault with a smile that never touched his dead eyes. He was handsome in a sleek, shark-like way, with a gold watch and fingers that stroked his chips a little too lovingly. He was staring at her now, so intensely it made her skin crawl, and she knew Sergio wasn't bluffing. Sergio tapped the folder. "Your father can't bet you, but he can give up every fake claim he has on your life. If I call and win, I own the deed, the fake debt, the marker, and the right to say where you go tonight. He won't come near you again without my permission." Her father sat up straight. "And if I win, you wipe out what I owe you." The tension in the room got so thick you could cut it with a knife. Even her dad looked shocked by the terms. Sergio's expression was unreadable. "I don't repeat myself, Raymond." Her father looked at his chips, then at her, and finally back at Sergio. Greed was the only thing that ever made his decisions. It always had been. "Del." She should have screamed, should have flipped the entire table over. Instead, she just stood there, blood pounding in her ears, knowing that some moments are too messed up for tears and way too dangerous for panic. The dealer started passing out the cards. She found herself drifting closer to the table, pulled in by some invisible string. It wasn't because she cared if her dad won. He'd lost any right to her loyalty years ago. It was because the game itself felt wrong. It only took her 3 seconds to see why. The dealer's thumb rested on the deck, just a half second too long. The cut was way too deep, and when the turn card was flipped, Enzo Carbone tapped his ring finger once on the table. A dead giveaway. Her back went rigid. The deck was stacked. This whole night was a scripted performance. Sergio made his bet with the same casual air a guy uses to put down a drink. Her father matched it, his hands trembling. The river card came down. Relief and greed flooded her father's face, the exact mix that turns men into idiots. He showed his hand like it was his salvation. 2 pair. Sergio glanced at the cards for less than a second before flipping his over. A flush. The entire room just stopped breathing. A noise ripped from her father's throat, something wild and animal. He threw himself back, sending his chair crashing to the floor. "No," he hissed. "No, that's not right." "It is," she said, the words just coming out. Every person in the room turned to look at her. She stepped up, pointing at the cards on the table. The deal was dirty. Enzo Carbone's lips twisted into a slow, smug smile. Sergio's gaze shifted to her, sharper this time. Her father stared at her like she was the one who had stabbed him in the back. A man tries to sell his own kid and then gets pissed when she finally fights back. "The house never fights the river," one of the old-timers grumbled. She completely ignored him. "Dealer dragged the cut. Burn card was high. That deck is stacked." Enzo just fanned his hand out. "You accusing the house of something, sweetheart?" She locked eyes with him. "I'm accusing the one guy in here who's smiling." That line made 2 bodyguards go rigid. Sergio just lifted a single finger, and they turned back into statues. He looked at the dealer. "Check the deck." The dealer's face went ghost white, which was all the confirmation they needed. A second guy stepped in, spread the cards, and found the notches in seconds. Tiny flaws on the corners, totally invisible to a rookie. The entire vibe in the room just flipped, turning into something way scarier than tense. It was that dead silence right before the shooting starts, where dangerous dudes figure out who's gonna be the first to drop. Her father, completely lost in a drunken haze, had no clue he'd just walked them into a kill box. But she did. That poker hand was never for him to win. It was a play to make Sergio Lombardi look like a fool at a rigged table in front of a full house. And she just announced it to the whole room. Enzo Carbone's smirk got wiped right off his face. Then Sergio stood up. She'd been around powerful guys her whole life, dudes who thought money could bend reality. None of them had a presence like Sergio Lombardi. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and the room's temperature instantly dropped by 20 degrees. His eyes flicked from the rigged cards to Enzo, then to my father, before they finally landed on me. "You saw it from the doorway." It wasn't a question, it was a verdict. I did. Good. With that one word, a world came crashing down. He nodded to 2 guys by the wall. "Take Raymond's credentials, his watch, his keys, and whatever shred of honor he walked in with. He's only leaving with his life tonight because she's here to see it." In that moment, my father absolutely blew up, not at me or Sergio, but at some ghost of a life his addiction told him he deserved. He was shut down instantly. One of Sergio's men put him on the floor with a move so smooth you'd barely call it violent. A gut instinct made me take 1 step back. My father was on the carpet, gasping, reeking of rage and cheap bourbon. "Maya," he choked out, "you are not leaving with him." I just looked down at the complete train wreck he'd become. For one burning second, I was 8 years old again, holding a plastic spelling trophy on our stoop, waiting for a dad who promised he'd be there. Then I was 11, watching him trade my bike for a poker chip. Then 17, realizing my mom died with less pain meds than she needed because he'd pocketed the emergency cash on the way to the hospital. I'd been burying him piece by piece my whole life. This was just the first time his body was in the grave. "I'm not leaving with you," I shot back. Sergio's eyes stayed on me for a beat too long, totally unreadable. Then, with a sharp nod to the door, he ordered, "You're coming with me now." I didn't move. "Why?" "Because this game was a show. Your father was the bait. And the guys who planned this little drama aren't done with you yet." Across the room, the spot where Enzo Carbone was standing was now totally empty. That was answer enough. I bent down, grabbed something off the carpet from the scattered chips, and shoved it in my pocket. A single ace, corner damaged. The proof of their whole scam. I stood up and faced the most powerful man in the city. "A separate room," I demanded. "A separate lock. No one puts a hand on me without my permission. I want every single document that has my name on it tonight. And if you lie to me even once, I will disappear." Something changed in Sergio's face. Not humor, but maybe some kind of respect. "Agreed." I followed him out, my heart banging against my ribs, trying to escape. The private office above the poker room was bigger than my entire apartment, with a coldness the room downstairs couldn't touch. Glass walls looked out over the Strip, making Las Vegas seem like a model city, lit up for guys like Sergio Lombardi to stare at on sleepless nights. Veronica Hale, his lawyer, was there with 3 binders and a tablet. A woman in her 40s, sharp as a razor, she had the vibe of someone who could destroy a mayor's career with one phone call and not be late for dinner. She pushed the documents across the table. I sat and started reading. By page 3, I felt sick to my stomach. My father had tied my name to a private medical debt, then a lien on the small house my mom left me. Both contracts were just legal enough to hold up in court, just dirty enough to destroy my future, and hidden inside a maze of shell companies meant to trap me in lawsuits for years if I fought back. I closed the folder. "When were you planning on telling me?" The question just hung there for all of them and none of them. "No later than tomorrow morning," Veronica said. A dry, humorless laugh escaped my lips. How incredibly thoughtful. Sergio was by the window, hands in his pockets, looking at the city like it was just an expensive problem he had to manage. "Your father didn't find my table by accident," he said. My head snapped up to look at him. He turned and met my eyes. Someone needed a game played out in the open. Someone needed an audience. And someone was betting that I would freak out when a drunken loser put his own daughter on the betting table. "Enzo? I don't make accusations without solid proof." That was all the confirmation I needed. I pulled the ace from my pocket and set it on the desk. Veronica was the first to grab it. "Where did you get this?" "On the floor, by the chips, after the last hand." Sergio walked over, picked up the card, and angled it in the light. And there it was, a tiny tear near the corner, almost impossible to see. His eyes met mine. "You read the situation faster than most. It's a side effect of being raised by a bunch of hustlers." Veronica carefully sealed the card in an evidence bag. Sergio watched me for a long time before he finally spoke. "These are your choices. 1, you walk out of here, now, and by sunrise, Carbone's people will put a lien on the house, freeze your accounts, and sell a very convincing story to some very bad people that you stole marked evidence from a private game. 2, you stay under my protection for 30 days. You help me find the traitors in my own organization, and when it's over, every single debt with your name on it gets wiped clean. I crossed my arms. Protection? I repeated. Isn't that just the word guys in your line of work use for a prison cell when they're trying to be polite? No. The denial was so quick, so absolute, it was actually scary. I met his gaze. He didn't look away. Then tell me the conditions. You'll get a room that nobody can enter without your say-so. You'll have a phone. You'll be paid a salary because this will be your job. You will have total access to every document about you. You will have a guard because tonight 6 men saw your father try to bet you, and then they saw you expose a rigged game. That makes you a weapon for my enemies and a problem for my allies. The raw honesty of it all was more shocking than any lie he could have told. I looked at Veronica. And if I agree, I'll need copies of everything, digital and hard copy. Done, she confirmed. I turned back to Sergio. And if I refuse, he didn't even blink. Then I'll still make sure Carbone doesn't get his hands on you tonight. But tomorrow morning's going to get a lot more difficult. And that was it. Not a threat, just a cold, unchangeable fact. I hated how much I'd come to depend on facts. She sank into the chair, the full weight of her surrender hitting her all at once. Her terms were laid out sharp and clear, 30 days, not one more 30. And the work she did would be on her terms. He shot back that her work would be on important things. That's not what she asked. A tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth gave him away. He agreed she would have a say, a private room. He pointed out that was already on the table. She was repeating it, she said, so he'd understand just how serious she was. He claimed he understood her the first time. The way he said it sent a jolt through her chest that she had to force back down. She agreed. 30 days, then she would get her house back, her name back, her life back. Sergio nodded. Valentina, he said, would show her the way. The woman who appeared was tall, her face a map of old scars, with a kind of peace that only comes from dealing with dangerous men and their messed up plans. Valentina Russo sized her up, her eyes clocking the tape under her cuffs, the way she stood at the balls of her feet before giving a small nod. So check it. This wasn't a welcome party, it was a straight-up appraisal. And honestly, she respected the lack of fake smiles. As they led her to the elevator, she hit pause and turned back to Sergio with one last rule. He just waited. If she caught wind of anyone saying she was won in a card game, she was personally going to wreck their nose. For a split second, you could see he was actually amused. He told her if she heard that rumor, she'd have to take a number. Her new digs were on the top floor of Palazzo Nero, a suite bigger than her childhood home and way too quiet for Vegas. The bathroom was prepped with plain products. The closet had clothes her size, and a blade was stashed in the dresser, exactly where a woman who never sleeps would check first. That last move was unsettling, and Valentina clocked it. He told them not to insult her with kids' PJs and not to insult him by thinking he'd need to disarm her, she explained. I gave her a sideways glance. For a guy people describe as a natural disaster, he says some surprisingly smart stuff. Valentina just shrugged. Even hurricanes follow a predictable path. Then, poof, she was gone. I let the shower run until it was ice cold, standing under the spray long after the stench of sweat, smoke, and the poker room was gone. I threw on a hotel robe I could never afford, sat on the bed, and dug my mom's silver ring into my palm until the hollow feeling inside turned into something solid. I didn't cry. So here's our main character, running on pure, unfiltered rage. No tears, no shaking with fear, just the toxic fumes of a plan coming together. It's 3 in the morning, and she's staring at the Vegas Strip, a river of fire built on scams and stupid bets. She gets it. This town wasn't built on luck. It was built on raw human desperation. Guys show up thinking they're the hero of their own story, only to leave with empty wallets and secrets that'll haunt them forever. She knows this game inside and out. Her old man taught her how to spot a desperate man hiding behind a confident smirk. And right then, a soft knock hits the suite door. Her hand snaps to the knife she's holding, a move born from pure instinct. But it's just Valentina's voice on the other side. "And before you think about stabbing me," she says, her face a total blank when the door opens, "you already had your hand on it." Then she spins around and leaves, a savage with few words. Our girl gets maybe 2 hours of shut-eye. By 8 o'clock the next morning, she's plugged into the command center of Palazzo Nero. Jacked up on black coffee, she faces a wall of screens the size of a small apartment. This city doesn't pray to saints. It worships its cameras. They see everything. And in Vegas, every con gets a high-def close-up. The room is dead silent and freezing, made for psychos who prefer surveillance feeds to sunlight. Squads of analysts are totally dialed in, headsets on, catching things a normal person would miss. And here's the kicker, she instantly feels like she belongs. After fighting so hard to build a life away from the hustle, the dialect of the underworld turns out to be hardwired into her brain. Valentina stands next to her as she reviews last night's footage. After almost 20 minutes of silence, Valentina breaks it. "This isn't your first time." "Monarch Queen on Fremont," she fires back, deadpan. "The Knightsbridge, minor leagues, full of amateurs, fake chips, and guys who think card counting is a personality trait." Valentina's expression is unreadable. Why wasn't he told about this? The question never came up. A single sharp nod from Valentina is all the confirmation needed. They rewind the tape, slowing it to a crawl. The dealer's thumb makes a tiny slip. The cut of the deck is totally botched. Enzo taps his ring on the table, the signal. Her father's eyes flick to the right a split second before the last card hits the felt, the classic tell of a guy who thinks he's just hit the jackpot. She plays it back 6 times. Valentina's voice is low. "Your father was in on it. He was in on it enough to expect a miracle. Would he have thrown you under the bus to save himself?" The question was meant to be a jab, but she feels nothing. He's done it before. With that line, all pity in the room just vanished. By noon, she had 3 facts pinned to the board. The deck was dirty, and the fix happened in-house. Enzo Carbone gave the signal, which meant he had access to the private room's secured cards. In the entire Palazzo Nero, only 6 people had that kind of clearance. Enzo was one, obviously. The other 5 were either fiercely loyal to Sergio, owed him big time, or were relics from his father's era. It was a tangled mess of allegiances. At 1 in the afternoon, Sergio himself strolls into the surveillance room. Nobody scrambles to their feet, that's not how he rolls, but the whole atmosphere tightens up. The sound of typing stops. Guys fix their posture. Sergio walks straight to her. No bodyguards, no warm-up. "What have you found?" Not, "How are you?" Not, "Did you sleep well?" And strangely, she digs that directness. "Your operation was hit from the inside," she reports, her voice all business. "The deck was rigged before it even got to the table." Enzo gave the signal. My father thought that hand was his salvation. Sergio's eyes scan the evidence board. "Believed?" "The person behind this wanted a spectacle," she says. "They were aiming for either your epic failure or my father's public execution, maybe both." He watches the frame-by-frame replay in silence. Then he asks, "And why use Raymond?" He's desperate, predictable, and naive. Guys like that are easy to play. They see a trap and call it an opportunity. At that, Sergio's eyes lock onto her. "What? You say that like you've put people in the ground." She meets his stare head on. "I buried my mother." "Is that enough?" Something flickered in his eyes, gone before she could name it. "Continue." So she did. They hammered away all afternoon. She mapped out the whole ecosystem, the flow of chips, late-night debts, and cash moving through all of Sergio's joints. She found phantom losses popping up across different accounts, small enough to ignore one by one, but huge when added up. Someone wasn't just fixing games, they were using the scam to hide a much bigger cash grab. As the sky turned orange, she followed the money trail from the ghost funds to a couple of loading docks and a sketchy club off Sahara called the Velvet Room. Sergio stood right behind her, soaking it all in. His scent was a clean mix of linen, leather, and premium smoke, a smell that never lingered since he wasn't the one lighting up. "You figured this out in one day?" he asked. "You hired the right daughter from the wrong man." He was quiet for a second. Then, "You need to eat." Her first instinct was to brush him off, and then she felt the massive black hole in her stomach. As if on cue, Valentina appeared with a container of food. She looked from Valentina to Sergio. "This whole place is seriously messed up." For the first time, Valentina cracked a tiny smirk. "You'll get used to it." 3 nights later, she would save Sergio Lombardi's life, long before she'd figured out what she even thought of the guy. From the street, the Velvet Room was nothing special. A dirty gold sign and blacked-out windows. The inside was a front of fancy velvet and secret meetings, a spot where politicians schmoozed with celebrities, and no one asked why an office needed 2 locks. A forensic accounting trail had brought her right to this club, and to a money guy named Cal Demico. She was dressed professionally, but that was just a shell for the iron will underneath as she mentally ran through every possible escape route. Cal Demico shows up 15 minutes late, first appearing like a ghost in the mirror behind the bar. "That's him," she murmurs. Sergio is perfectly still. Pocket, left or right. Jacket, interior. He's also showing a ton of tension in his left shoulder. He's armed. Sergio's move is a masterclass in distraction, a slow drift to a back hall that she matches automatically. Valentina breaks off to the right flank. Rafe doesn't move. The second Cal gets to the kitchen door, he spots them, and pure panic flashes in his eyes. He reaches inside his coat, but her attention is already past him, on a reflection from up high. A figure on some mezzanine, a flash from a silver railing, dark clothes, and the long, obvious barrel of a rifle aiming straight down. "Get down!" she yells. Her shoulder smashes into Sergio's ribs, shoving him sideways just as the rifle shot rips through the club. Behind them, glass explodes everywhere. The music cuts. Then the screaming starts. A second slug slams into the pillar, right where Sergio's head was a second ago. Rafe instantly becomes a human shield for the crowd, while Valentina pops a single shot from the hall, making the sniper duck. Cal tries to bail. Sergio starts to give chase. "Rafe's hit," she snaps. Over by the bar, Rafe's on one knee, a dark stain blooming on his jacket. Her training kicks in. She crunching over glass, grabs for napkins, then says, "Screw it," and yanks off her own belt. The wound's high on his thigh, a bleeder that'll kill him if she doesn't act, but she knows exactly what to do. "Look at me," she orders Rafe. He winces. "Not really my type." "Shut up. That means you're conscious." She cinches the belt tight above the wound. He curses, for real this time. Perfect. Anger keeps you tethered. Sergio is there for a hot second. Can you get him out of here? I got him, she says. Go get the guy with the rifle. Their eyes lock for a moment and he's gone. Valentina appears beside her, gun up. First responders are a joke in this part of town. The house dock is 4 minutes out. Then get me towels and a bottle. Valentina barks orders and the staff scrambles. By the time the doctor shows, her wrists are drenched in blood. Rafe's still breathing. Later, sniper neutralized, Cal Demico vanished, club on lockdown. She's in a back hallway, rinsing off the gore. She's at the sink, scrubbing her hands like it's a scene straight out of a gangster movie. The water goes from red to clear, but then her hands start to shake. And it's not because of the carnage. It's because she physically shoved the boss, Sergio Lombardi, out of the way on pure instinct. For a split second, seeing that rifle pointed at him felt way too personal. And that emotional spike is seriously freaking her out. The door creeps open. She doesn't even flinch. You moved me before he fired, Sergio notes. The tap keeps running. I did. Why? She grips the sink, letting out one harsh laugh. Seriously, you're asking me that now? It's the only time you get a straight answer. She kills the water and turns around. He's taken his jacket off. His white shirt is unbuttoned at the top, a dark smear of someone else's blood on the cuff. Up close, he loses that ice-cold poker room vibe. He feels more real, more solid, more exposed in a way that powerful guys absolutely hate. You want the truth, she says, because if you died tonight, this whole city would explode by morning. Your enemies would tear down everything you built, and I'd be caught in the fire. He just watches her for a long beat. That's not the whole story. No, it's not. So what's the rest? She could have lied. Instead, she tells him, I know what a room feels like right before a bullet hits the one person everyone thinks is a nobody. Something in his vibe shifts. A tiny, almost invisible change. My father started bringing me to his games when I was 13, she says, her voice dropping low. Not to gamble, but to watch, to spot the bluffs, the cheats, the guys trying to hide their money. She was always the underdog, just some scrawny girl in beat-up shoes. One night, some desperate player pulled a gun, but he didn't aim at my dad. He aimed at the guy running the game. The whole room went dead silent, everyone watching the guy in charge start to crack. I learned something huge that night. A man's power is only real until another guy proves it isn't. The silence between them becomes thick with unspoken words. He closes the distance between them, not to threaten her, but to just completely change the atmosphere. And you still did it. Don't make me regret it. The edge of his mouth quirks up in something that isn't really a smile. Too late, he breathes. He reaches past her, grabs a clean towel and holds it out. She just stares at it, then back at his face. It takes her a second to realize what it's for, to wipe the blood that's still staining her skin. She takes it, their fingers brushing for a fraction of a second. Her heart is hammering so hard it feels like rage. A whole week goes by before that almost kiss gets brought up. By then, she was way deeper in Sergio Lombardi's world than she ever planned to be. She noticed he ran on maybe 4 hours of sleep a night. Tops. She saw how his quiet, intense presence made big-shot men start babbling, just to fill the silence. His crew was more afraid of disappointing him than they were of his anger, which said a lot. His entire world was about precision and consequences. There was no room for pointless drama. The guy had a code. His workers were not allowed to hit on women in his joints. Thieves got fired, not beaten unless they got violent. Any guy who laid a hand on a woman in his casinos was quietly escorted out the back and blacklisted from his entire network of underground clubs. Women who couldn't handle their liquor got a free ride home. No funny business, no messing with their keys. The guy wasn't a saint. He was a monster with a strict set of rules. In a city like Vegas, that made a huge difference. The deeper their investigation went, the more rot they found. Forged IOUs, rigged games, laundered cash, and secret shipments hidden in liquor deliveries. Enzo Carbone was the spider at the center of this massive web. Every single clue pointed to him, but nobody could get close enough to land the kill shot. And then she saw it. The surveillance room was almost empty, close to midnight. The techs were gone, leaving just the drone of machines and the smell of stale coffee. Sergio was across from her, buried in a report, while she watched the same clip for the 20th time. She was focused on her father's hand. Not his cards, but the hand itself. His tell when he was lying sober was a thumb pressed to his jaw. But when he was drunk, the tell changed. One single tap of his ring finger on the table. Her eyes snapped across the screen. Enzo's hand, the exact same move, just once. She shot out of her seat as the whole scam clicked into place. She pointed at the monitor. "It's a signal." Sergio was by her side instantly. Her dad wasn't getting tips. He was getting orders, knowing the game was fixed. One tap meant stay in. Two would have meant fold. He was being systematically bled dry. Sergio stood right over her, his presence a heavy weight. Enzo was using the exact same signal. She pulled up a file from 2 days ago, a baccarat game at a different casino. A dealer makes a tiny gesture. Enzo walks past the table. The ring finger taps. A player then makes a crazy bet against insane odds and wins. Clip after clip showed the same thing. Sergio watched the whole sequence before he said anything. "He's signaling the players on my floor." "Not just players," she shot back, the ugly truth hitting her. "Your dealers are on his payroll." She fell back in her chair. "This is bigger than just skimming. He's building an army of people who owe him their lives, and they think it was just dumb luck. And you figured it out because your father taught you this secret language." The truth in his words was a bitter pill to swallow. Yes. He just looked at her for a long moment. "A useful man, your father," he finally said, his voice flat and cold. The chair screeched as she whipped around to face him. "Be careful!" His look sharpened, not with regret, but with intensity. He knew he'd hit a weak spot. "My father is a gutless coward who loved the cards more than my mother, and more than himself. The only useful thing he ever taught me was how to spot a liar before they even open their mouth." The room went dead quiet. Sergio straightened up. "You are correct," he admitted. "The agreement was a total shock. He could have just shut her down. Most guys in his position would have, especially with other people watching. But he didn't. His respect was almost sharper than an insult. She stood up, the room suddenly feeling way too small. "I need some air." Nobody tried to stop her. She took the private stairs to the rooftop terrace and stepped out into the desert night. A hot gust of wind hit her, along with a view of Vegas that looked like some kind of wild, chaotic dream. The Strip was a glowing river of light down below. The Bellagio fountains were putting on a show for the crowds, a spectacle to make them forget how much cash they'd lost. Planes sliced through the sky. Beyond all the fake glitz, the desert was still there, huge and uncaring. Her hands gripped the railing as she fought to unclench her jaw. And just like that, the door clicks open. Sergio steps out onto the roof, keeping a respectable distance, a move she totally clocks. He leads with, "I don't make a habit of apologizing." She's just staring at the skyline, firing back. Sounds more like a threat than an apology. He pauses, then admits, "My comment was out of line." The honesty almost throws her off. She counters, "So I should feel bad for him because his weakness was my come up?" "No," he answers, his voice low but solid. "Pain and purpose can be in the same person. They're not the same thing." His words hit her like a truck because he's right, and she hates his guts for it. The wind whips her hair around, and she pushes it back to drop the backstory. "My mom cleaned hotel rooms, 2 shifts. She'd come home smelling like chemicals, but would still make me eggs at midnight. When she got sick, she hid it. No money. When things got bad, there was supposed to be emergency cash. She thought it was safe. He swiped just enough to lose it all, then lied about it. She died 6 months later, technically natural causes. But I'll never forget counting what he stole from that envelope." She'd never told that whole story to a single soul. Not her mentor, who knew her rage was her engine. Not her crew, who just thought she hated gamblers. And definitely not the guy who basically owned the city, and now her. Sergio just listened, dead silent. When she's done, he finally speaks. "My mom dealt blackjack on the night shift way before I knew what losing turns men into." He goes on, "My father drank half her pay, gambled the rest, and once pawned her wedding ring on a hand he was sure would be a winner." She turns to face him. His face is unreadable, but his voice is raw, like metal that's been in a fire his whole life. "When your father said your name," he says, voice dangerously low, "I was about to send in through the damn table." A knot tightens in her chest. "So why didn't you?" she challenges. Because taking him out right then would have been the exact play our real enemy wanted. The logic was cold, hard, and correct. He glances at the city. "So I took the contract," he says, "and I made sure everyone saw me take it, not you." She frowns. "And the point of that was?" This time, he locks eyes with her. "This city can whisper about a woman who's with me," he says, "but predators don't hunt what they think is my property." That line should have infuriated her. Instead, it did something way more dangerous. She actually believed him. It hit her then. He was using his own terrifying reputation as a shield to protect her from the smaller sharks. The silence between them got heavy, packed with everything they weren't saying. She was suddenly aware of the wind, the city, and the man standing just out of arm's reach. "You really don't take what isn't offered," she says softly. For a split second, his eyes drop to her lips, then snap back to hers. "No." A jolt goes right through her. Every instinct screamed at her to back away, to remember she was on a roof with a man killers feared. Instead, she closed the gap between them. She didn't touch him, but getting that close changed the air itself. "If I kiss you," she whispered, "you can't write it off as a thank you?" A dark, subtle smile plays on his lips. "In that case, be sure why you're doing it." Oh, she was sure. That was the scary part. She leaned in and kissed him, braced for him to pull back or act shocked. But what she got was the display of control so intense it was almost unreal. No grabbing, no taking advantage. He just lifted a hand, slow as hell, giving her an out and held her neck like she was made of glass. His kiss was measured, warm, and brutally patient. Nothing was rushed, nothing was taken. In that one moment, The whole city below them just vanished. The kiss wasn't a power play, but a free fall they took together. Her hand went to his collar, a clinical check to see if a guy like Sergio Lombardi even had a pulse. And there it was, a frantic rhythm that was way more thrilling than it should have been. He was the one who broke the kiss, his forehead almost touching hers, his breathing ragged for the first time she'd ever seen. Maya. Her name wasn't a sweet nothing, it was a line he was struggling to hold. She swallowed hard. What is this? If we do this, he said, his voice a low rumble, it won't be because a room full of idiots watched you get treated like a prize. It took a second for his rule to sink in. Then it all connected. The spectacle at the game, her father's betrayal, the public humiliation. He was making it clear that whatever this was, it wouldn't be built on that garbage. The realization cracked something inside her. Good, she whispered back, because any man who thinks I'm easily won has no idea who I am. That got a rare smile out of him. Quick, powerful, and way too magnetic. No, he admitted. I doubt easy has ever been a word used to describe you. Her entire world shifted. She stepped back, needing air. 3 days later, Enzo Carbone made his move. A box of marked decks was conveniently found in her suite. They found 2 envelopes stuffed with dirty money behind a fake wall panel. A forged digital transfer was set up through a ghost account, tracked back to a terminal connected to her. The frame-up was perfect, and its perfection was the whole point. A total insult. The meeting that followed was a straight-up tribunal in one of Sergio's private rooms, with 12 guys around a table radiating pure tension. Valentina stood silently behind her. Sergio was in charge. 3 seats down, Enzo had on a perfect mask of concern. Her gut screamed to end him right there. Instead, she stood like a statue as one of Sergio's men laid out the evidence and said, "This looks like an open and shut case." "Of course it does," she shot back, her voice like ice in the thick air. "This is the part where they put on a show, a theater of loyalty where the boss's judgment is all that matters. Her fighting back is just the predictable last struggle before the end." Enzo's sigh is a masterclass in acting, painting her as a tragic letdown. Her response, "Your face," is a raw, weak punch against a system she can't beat. Sergio's tiny reaction, a crack in his poker face, is the only thing keeping her from completely breaking down. This isn't about justice, it's about a carefully planned takedown. A hollow laugh escaped her, a sound of pure disbelief. In this moment, Sergio's silence isn't just silence, it's a statement. After what happened at the rooftop, him refusing to defend her in public is a massive psychological hit. When he finally stands, the whole room goes quiet. His verdict, "Maya stays under guard," is delivered with the cold logic of a boss handling a messy situation, not protecting a person. It's the fact he won't even look at her that really does the damage, confirming a political betrayal that hurts worse than any open attack. Valentina's touch is a silent warning, a reminder to focus on survival. She let Valentina lead her away, knowing that pride with no backup plan is a death wish in their world. The fancy suite was now a gilded cage, its luxury a sick joke. Here, she cycles through the stages of betrayal. First, burning rage, then ice-cold shock, and finally the hollow feeling of her own stupidity. By the time Sergio shows up, she's worn a groove in the carpet from pacing. He comes in alone, looking like a guy who just walked off a very stressful stage. "Just say what you came here to say," she ordered, her voice completely dead, "and then get out." He offers her a knife. It's a complicated move, a truce, a way of giving her power back, the very tool of violence their world runs on. He explains the public takedown was all an act. The room was bugged, they were being watched. It's the paranoid world they live in. His plan was to fake a split to trap Enzo. She refuses the knife, refusing to accept his cold-blooded strategy. "Am I supposed to applaud?" she asked, calling out the human cost of his big brain play. Her fury didn't disappear. It just changed into something colder and harder. "Complicated," she scoffed, mocking his excuse. "That would have been good to know before you threw me to the wolves." She wasn't buying his whole greater good argument to justify what he did to her. For the first time, his own control finally snapped, not with anger, but with the raw weight of insane pressure. "You think I don't know that?" The silence that followed was heavy. He placed the knife on the table between them, stating the grim truth of their situation. There are no clean moves left. And that shut her up, because he was spitting facts. His look wasn't just angry, it was on another level. He laid it all out. The beef had escalated, and Enzo went straight for the jugular, snatching her dad from the same facility Sergio had him in. Talk about a twisted moral gray area. Sergio's protection was just another cage. He'd have been clapped in 48 hours, he said, zero emotion. The note Enzo left was pure villain theater, a trap designed to hit her where it hurt most. "Bring the ace, come alone." Her hands gripped the paper, her worst fears now in print. "He knows I have it." She stared at Sergio, seeing the whole messed up situation. "So you want me to be bait while you set up a trap?" His answer was blunt. "I want you to not walk into one." Then came the plea. "Don't go without me." A rare crack in his tough guy armor, an order that softened into a desperate request. That vulnerability almost got to her, but her turning away said it all. The Old Star Motel, a dump on the edge of town, was where she'd make her stand. So, of course, she went in solo. It was always going to happen, driven by that raw, wild grief that fools you into thinking you're brave. Enzo read her like a book. She'd always choose going rogue over following some dude's plan. She moved like a ghost, ditching her ride and sticking to the alleys. Her prep was legit. The ace was stashed, a blade was handy, and a burner phone was sitting dead in her pocket. She'd already chucked her real phone, thinking Valentina's tracker warning was all talk. A fatally arrogant miscalculation. Turns out, Valentina wasn't bluffing. Inside room 11, the scene was a total wreck. Her father was strapped to a chair looking like he'd aged a decade, his failure carved right into his face. He breathed her name, and she cut him off with a wall of ice. "Nope," she snapped, killing the moment. "You don't get to say my name." The whole room stank of rotten failure. He tried to make an excuse, and she shot back, "Which he?" All he could do was let out a broken laugh, admitting how many times he'd sold someone out. She just waited for the truth. He finally met her eyes with the chilling honesty of a man fresh out of lies. The confession was brutal. Enzo flipped him 2 months back, using his debts against him. His job was simple. If she started figuring things out, he was supposed to lead her straight into the ambush. "You see too much," he whispered, stating a fact. He remembered you from when you were just a kid. This whole trap wasn't for a player. It was for a mind that could see the entire game. The truth hit her like a punch to the gut. "So you sold my eyes?" He just dropped his head in a silent yes. I was so sure Lombardi would never take that bad. And there it was. The root of his screw-up wasn't evil, just the pathetic math of a lifelong degenerate gambler. He gambled on his own daughter and lost big. "You were wrong," she said, her voice totally flat. For a split second, she saw a flicker of the dad she used to know. "I know," he choked out. She stepped closer, making sure he heard every devastating word. "The worst part isn't the debt or the papers or you using me as a bargaining chip. It's that some stupid part of me still showed up to save you. And I absolutely hate myself for it." His face crumpled exactly as it should have. From the doorway, a slow, mocking clap echoed, a predator admiring its handiwork. Enzo Carbone leaned there, looking incredibly satisfied. As his thugs moved in, Maya instinctively grabbed her father's chair to use as a shield. Enzo's eyes locked on her. "You brought it. Smart." He sized her up, not like a victim, but an equal. The Viper in a nice suit. His smile was a weapon. "This is why I wanted you. Most people are marks. You always saw the con." She held her breath, ready to spring. He took a single, deliberate step forward. "Give me the ace." I let him go. Her father's choked out "don't" was completely ignored. "It is never just a card," she shot back. "A code of honor in a world with none." "Too bad." Enzo sighed and his goons charged. In that split second, she acted, slamming the light switch and throwing the room into total chaos. A gunshot, a scream. She moved through the dark on pure killer instinct, dropping low, shattering a kneecap, her blade sinking into flesh. This was a violent, desperate takeover. A frustrated curse echoed in the darkness. Another gunshot, and then the motel windows exploded inward, not from bullets, but from the insane force of flashbangs. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard screaming. It was Valentina. The wave of relief was so intense it almost dropped her to her knees. But another shot cracked the air, this one way too close. Her father jolted. In the strobing chaos, time froze as a red flower bloomed across his shirt. "No," she breathed out. As Sergio's team flooded the room, Enzo was already scrambling out a back window. Sergio was the last man in, his eyes instantly taking in the whole tragic picture. Her father, and all the blood. "Carbone!" Valentina's shout from outside confirmed the fight was still on. Dropping to her knees, Maya saw the wound was a death sentence. She moved on pure instinct, her hands trying to find the source, to put on pressure. But he grabbed her wrist, his grip shockingly tight. A bloody smile twisted his lips. "Don't, Maya," he rasped, his voice a gurgle. A cough ripped through him, seeming to tear the final, ugly truth from his lungs. "I loved the table more than anything." "This is my final, ugliest truth," he confesses. "Worse than the money, your mother, or the child on the stairs." She thinks one right move could fix all this. Tears are cutting tracks down her face. "You forfeit the right to tell me this." "I'm aware," he admits, a wound deeper than any bullet. "You were never part of my con. You calculate, you endure. Wager on your own strength, mija, not on men like me." His grip loosens. She grabs it again. His eyes look past her to Sergio, who's already thinking 5 steps ahead. Enzo is loose and problems always come in waves. His gaze finally lands on her, a moment of real connection after years of being checked out. "My apologies," he breathes, and then he's just gone. She doesn't remember screaming. Valentina later said she didn't. She just went completely silent. That evening, Enzo vanished, disappearing into the back roads around the motel. 2 of his guys had a different end. One was taken out in the parking lot. The second cracked before sunrise, spilling the entire plot. Enzo's betrayal wasn't just a heist, but a scheme to build a shadow empire, using debt to engineer a takeover. Her father was just one body in a huge, deadly calculation. The next day, she hid out at her mom's house, a stucco box with a cracked driveway. The crooked porch light felt like a memorial to a future that was now impossible. She cried on the kitchen floor with her back against the gold cabinets, feeling a pain that was both physical and soul deep. She grieved for him, for her mom, for all the lost time, and for confusing the act of surviving with being strong. Sergio waited outside, a guard in the driveway for almost 2 hours, showing he understood things most men don't. He knew that sometimes being safe means being alone. When she finally came out, he was leaning against his car, waiting. They shared a silent moment. She walked down the stairs to stand right in front of him. "Were you sure I'd come out?" "I was." "Does always being right ever get boring?" "Occasionally." A smile almost broke through, but she just said, "He found some honesty at the end. I despise the bullet that gave it to him." Sergio studied her. "In this town, truth is an indulgence," he said, his voice less jaded than just tired. A raw, lonely laugh escaped her. "You have a strange way of offering comfort." "I have a way of offering honesty." That one truth was everything. She stepped into his space, resting her forehead on his chest. His arms immediately came around her, not with pressure or ownership, but with presence. A solid, unmoving anchor. In that cracked driveway, she completely shattered, the city noise fading to nothing. He didn't offer fake platitudes or badmouth her dad. He just held her until she could breathe again. As she pulled back, he brushed a tear from her face. "Come back with me," he offered. She looked him dead in the eye. "To the sanctuary or the battlefield?" "Both." The answer was so perfectly Sergio that she actually laughed. In that sound, her grief cracked, letting in a new kind of strength. The fear was gone, fear of his fortress and fear of him. "My time playing games by the rules of other men is over," she told him. His focus became razor sharp. "Excellent," he replied. "This ends in 3 days." He laid out the entire strategy that night from a private lounge overlooking the casino as the clueless city below gambled on. Not knowing its real power, brokers were about to play one final, violent hand. Enzo's battlefield was a ritzy charity gala at the Crescent Ballroom. The joint, owned by Sergio, was crawling with politicians, moneymen, and the city's upper crust. The perfect cover for a hostile takeover. It looked like a power flex, but this was Enzo's opening shot. His game plan: leak some nasty secrets, create chaos in Sergio's crew, and then take him out. Maya nails it. "He's planning to rig the game." "Correct," Sergio says, "and you will be there." "I will," she agrees, then catches her reflection and changes her tune. "No, I'm not just attending, I'm playing." Sergio went completely still. Across the room, Valentina was radiating pure disapproval. Sergio's voice dropped. "Denied." Maya just folded her arms. "The last time I was in a game like this, I was the prize. This time, I'm picking my own seat." His jaw locked up. "Maya, you need a tell reader, a card shark. You need someone who knows exactly how Enzo cheats when he gets arrogant. That person is me. Not your boys, not a mercenary. Me. Your talent isn't the issue. The exposure is." "I get that," she shot back, "which is exactly why it has to be me." Over by the bar, Valentina muttered in Italian, her tone a perfect blend of rebellion and support. Sergio glanced at Valentina, who gave him nothing. He turned back to Maya. "If you refuse, it won't stop me from going myself." His stare got harder. "That threat works better when your history doesn't prove you'd do it anyway." She simply tilted her head. Precisely. The silence that followed was thick, the kind before a storm. Then a sharp sigh from Sergio, the sound of him conceding to someone he respected. You get one seat, he said. Valentina has the room on lockdown. 2 of my snipers are posted upstairs off the grid. You'll be wearing a mic. If it goes sideways, you say the code word and it's over. The code? He paused. Home. She could only stare, the sheer weight of his decision not landing until he saw her entire expression change. The hard lines of his face softened for a split second. You hate that word, he pointed out. No, she replied, her voice completely open. That's the problem. He moved around the table, his presence close but not invasive. Then don't make me regret this. She lifted her chin. You're acting like you don't already know I'm the best bad decision you've made in years. A rare, dark smile appeared on his lips. That, he confirmed, I'm aware of. For 2 days, they got ready. Not for the game. She was a master at that. Valentina drilled her on security plans and emergency exits. A limping but fierce Rafe taught her how to move like a ghost through a crowd. Through it all, Sergio was a silent shadow, his eyes constantly on her. The final night, with the ballroom locked down, she found him alone in the high-limit area where her nightmare began. One lamp lit the poker table and a new deck of cards. He was in the exact chair from the night her father gambled her away. She walked in and locked the door. Are we burning the table as a symbolic gesture? She asked. Or is that scheduled for later? He looked up at her. I was thinking of getting new felt. She almost smiled. Her eyes went to the empty chair where her father had been. A sharp, phantom pain shot through her, and Sergio noticed it instantly. Without a word, he moved to a different chair, not a seat of power, but one of an equal. His action was an invitation, not a command. She sat across from him. He then slid a folded paper across the table. It was their first contract, with her name, her dad's fake signatures, and Sergio's. She looked him dead in the eye. After this is over, he said softly, this gets burned. Why tell me now? Because if things go wrong tomorrow, I don't want you thinking some paper in my safe meant more than you. A heavy silence filled the space between them. Her fingers brushed the edge of the paper without taking it. Why do you have to talk like that? Like what? In a way that makes me forget half this city is scared to death of you. He leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers. The part that listens is the part I respect. A short laugh escaped her before she turned serious. If I go down tomorrow, you do not follow. Sergio. His name, said with that much force, shifted something in him. Her voice was iron. If that happens, this has to be known. What's between us didn't happen because you needed a weapon. It grew because you never treated me like a trophy. He sat there, perfectly still. He didn't even blink, so she went on, the truth feeling like a release for the first time. I can't say what happens after Enzo. Maybe nothing. Or maybe we get a second of peace in this messed up life. But I know this is real. For a long moment, the armor of the great Sergio Lombardi seemed to disappear. He stood, walked around the table, and offered her his hand. It was a simple gesture. She took it and stood up. He lifted her hand, turning it over to press a kiss to her wrist, right over her pulse. When his eyes met hers again, the ice was gone. If tomorrow ends badly, he said softly, I will burn this city down before I let them have you. She couldn't breathe. That's an incredibly dysfunctional thing to say. It is. A real tired smile appeared. So are you. The Crescent Ballroom was a gilded cage, all crystal and boring flowers. The dealers here were ghosts, and the officials ignored the mobsters next to them. The rich faked their laughter because money demands politeness. The scene was lavish, pricey, and hollow, a perfect reflection of the city. She wore black, not a gown, but combat-ready clothes. Her hair was up, and her mother's ring was a flash of silver. Valentina pushed for an earpiece. She refused. The microphone on her wrist would be enough. The night's biggest secret was a real object, stitched into the lining of her jacket. Sergio's arrival, 10 minutes after hers, was like an earthquake that changed the room's gravity. His black tuxedo wasn't clothing, it was armor. Every guy's head snapped in his direction. Women tried to act like they didn't notice. The flash of cameras bounced off his stone-cold face. Across the packed room, his eyes found hers. The look lasted only a second. It was all they needed. Enzo Carbone played the part of the friendly host with terrifying skill, a masterclass in smiling evil. He glad-handed officials, his handshakes hiding the poison in his words. The final game started at 9:30. She slid into the empty seat to Sergio's right, and the entire room went quiet. When the announcer said her name, it sounded alien in the charged silence. A low murmur of gossip spread through the crowd. Only a few knew the backstory, the girl from the infamous card game, now supposedly Lombardi's property. She let the rumors fly. The end of the night would tell the real story. Enzo sat opposite her. A bold play, he purred as the cards were dealt. That's a common line for men with shaky hands. His smile was thin and bloodless. In mourning, yet so defiant. How impressive. She stacked her chips. Alive, yet I can see right through you. The first few hands went exactly by the book. Enzo was playing clean for now. The dealer's hands were too smooth, his moves too perfect. It was a show of fairness for the audience. This perfection was the tell. Real pros don't need to act innocent, they just deal. She threw away 2 small pots, one a third, then folded a great hand just to watch the table. 2 tables away, a gaming official stood watch. 2 of Sergio's men were by the far wall, pretending to talk about charity. Valentina drifted through the guests, a killer in heels. On the 7th hand, she saw it. The cheat wasn't with the dealer's hands, it was in the discard tray. The wear on the edges of the used cards didn't match the new deck, a tiny difference in the finish. The plan was to bring in a rigged deck when the pot was massive. Her face gave nothing away. Sergio still hadn't made a move. He watched. She watched. Enzo took 2 big pots, his posture getting lazy with overconfidence. This was the exact psychological flaw she was counting on. Men like him always mistake stillness for surrender. On the 10th hand, she got 2 queens. A flicker of something crossed Enzo's face at her bet. The dealer's thumb rested on the deck a millisecond too long. That was it. The signal, the tell, the turn card was legit. The river card would be the fake. She knew it an instant before it happened. Hold! Her voice was a whip crack, making half the room jump. The dealer froze, card in his grip. Every eye in the ballroom locked onto her. Sergio kept his stone-cold poker face. Enzo, however, let a smug smirk creep out. We got a problem here? You bet we do. Absolutely, she confirmed, getting to her feet with a slow, dramatic flair. Her eyes scanned past him, hitting the commissioner, then sweeping the silent room before zeroing in on the dealer. That card wasn't in the deck we started with. You could hear a pin drop in the ballroom. The dealer audibly gulped. That's insane! Is it? She held out a hand for the discards. Instantly, Valentina was there, not to block her, but to make sure this went down by the book. She grabbed the top burn card, tilting it into the light. To the untrained eye, the edge looks black. Her voice cut through the silence, demanding their attention. It's not. It's blue-black. A tiny difference in the die, the exact same as the ace from the game 4 weeks back, where my father got totally wiped out at a crooked table. The whispers exploded into a roar. Enzo's smirk? Gone. She pulled the preserved ace from her jacket. The whole room gasped. Her eyes met Sergio's, and she saw a flash of raw pride that almost broke her focus. She laid the ace down next to the burn card. The notches line up perfectly, she declared. Same edge job, same doctored card stock. Enzo Carbone has been flooding the city with bogus decks to manufacture debt and blackmail people with fake losses. A commissioner shot to his feet. An investor stood up with him. Enzo kicked his chair back, fuming. This is just a cheap trick. Nope, she shot back. This is mathematics finally getting sick of your face. The dealer bolted. Valentina intercepted and dropped him in less than 3 moves. Just then, the entire room was thrown into pitch-black darkness. This was part of the plan. The blackout and the screams were perfectly timed. She hit the deck on pure reflex. A gunshot blasted through the room, then another. From the heart of the chaos, Sergio's voice roared, "Lock this room down!" Red emergency lights started flashing. People were scrambling. Guards were yelling orders. A waiter went down in a crash of glass. People were crying. People were praying. Enzo had vanished. She didn't waste a second. She was already gone. Service corridor. First left. Maintenance stairs. She knew the layout cold, having run drills 2 days ago with Valentina timing her every move. Her wrist communicator buzzed. Maya. It was Sergio. Location. North service stairs, she panted. Stop. Not happening. The static on the line crackled with his anger. Then, roof access. He's going for the sign catwalk. She'd already figured that out. She flew up the stairs, bursting through the roof door into the sticky Las Vegas air, the smell of steel, and the hum of old neon. The electric city glittered below. In the distance, Enzo was clutching a wounded arm, heading with a gun toward the giant palazzo sign on the building's face. A thin catwalk. 0 cover. The footing was a joke. Sergio appeared in his doorway right behind her. A gunshot rang out. He stumbled. For one single frozen second, her entire world just stopped. He dropped to one knee by the wall, a hand clamped on his shoulder. Enzo's laugh was a nasty, ugly sound. Well, look what we have here. It all played out in slow motion. The hit wasn't fatal. A shoulder wound. It hurt like hell, but it was survivable, if they got out of this. Enzo backed onto the catwalk, his gun aimed at Sergio, but his eyes were locked on her. What a town, he shouted over the wind. Guys built it on luck, then they get all mad when the house cheats. House. She moved just enough to pull his attention. You were never the house. You were just a rat scurrying in the walls. His face twisted into a snarl. She flicked a look at Sergio. He was standing again, shaky, his shirt soaked in blood, his face hard as a rock. Her eyes snapped back to Enzo. No, she said, her voice dead flat. I'm finishing what you started. He swung the gun towards her. This was the exact moment she'd been waiting for. In that tiny sliver of time, his focus on Sergio broke for half a second. In that same instant, the catwalk groaned under him, where a rusty support was giving way. Guys like Enzo always watch your face when they think they're winning. Another lesson from her dad. She made her play, not for the gun, for the control box wired to the sign. Grabbing the maintenance bar at her feet, she smashed the emergency cutoff. The massive palazzo sign went dead. The world plunged into darkness. Enzo fired blind, the bullet sparking off the metal. She crashed into him with a low, brutal tackle, her shoulder driving into his gut with a force taught by a mentor who used words no lady should ever hear. She was thinking every single one of them now. The gun flew across the catwalk. Enzo's hand grabbed her jacket as they hit the railing. For a terrifying second, there was just the wind, the metal, and the endless drop to the city lights below. His elbow slammed her ribs. Pain flashed behind her eyes. She rammed the bar up under his chin, powered by all the rage she'd bottled up since her father said her name like it was just another debt. His grip slipped. She ripped herself away. As he dove for the gun, Sergio fired. The sound tore through the wind and the night. Enzo froze, looking down at the red stain spreading on his chest, almost confused that his luck had finally run out. He swayed once, then twice, before tipping over the railing and into the nothingness below. The silence that followed on the roof was so total it was painful. Her legs buckled. She collapsed onto the catwalk, shaking, staring at the empty air where Enzo just was. Sergio was there in a heartbeat, his own arm a mess. His hand cupped the back of her head, a solid, warm, grounding force. "Look at me." She did. The city lights were a blurry mess through her tears. "Are you with me?" "Yes." "Good." Then all the adrenaline left her body at once, and she was falling toward him before she even knew she was moving. He led her off the catwalk, across the roof, and back to the service hall. Valentina was there with a medic team and a single raised eyebrow that said an entire paragraph. "I totally told you so. Thank God you're not dead. And if you bleed out now, I will be seriously annoyed." Sergio refused any help until she was checked out. She refused to let them touch her until they treated him. Valentina threatened to drug them both. Rafe, looking pale but walking surprisingly fast, called them a couple of stubborn idiots. The hospital was a top-tier place, so expensive its walls were probably under NDA. Sergio's shoulder was stitched up. Her ribs were badly bruised, one almost cracked, and her hands were torn up. But they made it, a fact that felt totally unreal. By the next morning, the story had burned through the Vegas power circles. Enzo was gone. His dirty empire was smashed, and the commissioner launched a big public investigation. 3 councilmen suddenly went on vacation. 2 rival capos swore loyalty to Lombardi before the sun came up. Half the city said they saw it coming. The other half pretended they'd never even heard of Carbone. Vegas never apologizes, it just shuffles the deck. A week later, her father's toxic deals were voided. The casino was hers. The medical bills vanished. Her accounts were unfrozen. 2 creditors were strongly encouraged to lose her number. Veronica dropped off the final paperwork with a clinical air, plus a bottle of ridiculously overpriced champagne. Maya ignored it. She knew all about the fake happiness you find in a bottle. She was alone in the empty high-stakes poker room on the 8th night after the takedown when Sergio walked in. The same green lights hung over the same polished table, but the room felt different. The ghosts were gone, leaving just the history. He shut the door and walked toward her. His shoulder was healing, the stitches gone. He wore a dark suit, no tie, collar open, looking less like a myth and more like a man, which made him about 1,000 times more dangerous. He was holding a silver lighter. He set it on the table. Next to it, he put down the folded contract from their first meeting, the property deed, the final IOU, and the ace of spades. She stared at the pile of relics for a long time. He flicked the lighter open, its flame dancing in the dark, and then pushed it toward her. The message was obvious. She picked up the contract first, touching it to the fire. The paper curled into blackness, the signatures that owned her turning into nothing but ash. Next, she burned the copy of the deed, a symbolic end to a hard-fought war. Then the last of the debt. Finally, she held the ace for a long moment before letting the flame take it. When the last spark died out, the entire room seemed to take a breath. Sergio's eyes were locked on hers, finally breaking the heavy silence. "I won the hand, Maya." Her gaze met his, hearing the words he didn't say. "But I never won you." That unspoken truth hit her like a physical blow. For a second, she forgot to breathe. Then she stood up, walked around the table, and stopped right in front of him. "No," she said, her voice soft. "You didn't." A muscle in his jaw twitched, the old tell of a man whose power could buy whole cities, but never anything that was freely given. She put a hand on his shirt, right over the heart she'd tried to find once before. "You earned me," she said. "That's a different currency." He went completely still. His hand came up to her face, his thumb brushing her cheek like he was checking if she was real. Maya. Her name was the answer to a question he'd been carrying his whole life. A small smile played on her lips. "You know, the story they tell in the city is wrong. They say Sergio Lombardi won me in a poker game." A smirk started to form on his lips. Did he? She closed the last bit of distance between them. "No," she said. "He won back the pieces of me that my father threw away, and then he was smart enough to wait while I put myself back together." "Yo, that bombshell just broke this dude." He lays one on her, and it's not some power move. It's like he just found the one thing he'd burn his whole empire down for. This ain't for the cameras, people. It's a total paradigm shift. He's careful with her injuries as the entire drama of the city just vanishes. They finally break, and he asks, "What's the play?" She just smiles. "First, I keep the house." He's like, "Good. I also keep my name." "Also good. And I'm taking over your casino integrity department with a contract that lets me fire anyone who treats me like wallpaper." And get this, the guy lets out a real laugh, a sound nobody ever hears. "Done," he says. "And when we fight, and we will, you don't pull rank, and I won't start throwing things unless it's a code red situation." He actually stops to think. "Define code red." She laughs right back at him, then gets dead serious. "Last time I was in this room, I thought my life was completely over." You can see the dark memory hit him. That should never have happened. "No," she shoots back, "but it did. And I am so over letting the worst night of my life be my whole story." She grabs his hand, pulling him away from that table and straight toward a city built on lies. Las Vegas is a city that loves to tell stories, and the official version is this. Her deadbeat dad offered her up on a bet, and Sergio Lombardi, the king who owns half the strip, just showed up to collect his winnings. But let the city have its little rumors. Only the two of them will ever know the real deal that went down that night. Because on the night her father tried to lose her, she wasn't won by anyone. Instead, she became the one asset in all of Vegas that was officially off the table, permanently.
Life lesson: manipulation becomes most dangerous when the victim has been trained to confuse attachment with survival. From a psychological perspective, Maya's story is not merely about organized crime, it is about coercive conditioning. Her father, Raymond, exhibits traits associated with chronic addiction reinforced by narcissistic self-preservation. He does not simply make immoral choices, he reorganizes reality around his compulsion. In clinical terms, individuals like him frequently externalize blame, instrumentalize intimacy, and experience other people primarily through utility. Maya is not his daughter in the emotional sense required by parenthood. She is repeatedly an emergency resource. That early environment matters. A child raised inside unpredictability becomes fluent in microsignals, tone shifts, hand tension, eye movement, pacing, false warmth. The child learns that safety depends on anticipation. Later, observers call that child strong or mature or hard to fool. What they often fail to see is that these strengths are adaptive scars. Maya's talent for spotting the rigged deck is not a supernatural gift, it is the adult form of childhood vigilance. Her connection to Sergio is equally revealing. At first glance, one might misread her proximity to another dangerous man as repetition compulsion, but the distinction is crucial. Sergio operates from power, yes, but he does not demand emotional surrender as payment for protection. He establishes boundaries, states consequences clearly, and most importantly, does not convert her dependency into ownership. For a trauma-conditioned mind, this difference is transformative. It introduces a relational model in which safety is not purchased through self-erasure. Raymond's late apology is psychologically consistent with what often happens under terminal emotional pressure. The collapse of denial, especially when death is imminent, can produce a final burst of clarity. That clarity does not redeem him. Redemption requires sustained repair, not accurate last words, but it does matter for Maya because it confirms what she needed to hear. The damage was real and she did not imagine it. The life lesson here is clinically harsh but deeply useful. Many people remain trapped not because they love their abusers, but because their nervous systems were trained to seek familiarity over health. The body confuses known danger with home. Maya's arc becomes meaningful because she breaks that pattern. She does not stop loving selectively. She stops mistaking exploitation for devotion. That is a profound psychological shift. In therapeutic language, it is the beginning of self-authorship. In human language, it is the moment someone finally says, "I will no longer survive by abandoning myself."